2025 has been a crazy year for AI. At the end of 2024, OpenAI introduced O1, which brought reasoning models to the entire world. And right when 2025 started, DeepSeek rose with DeepSeek R1, an open weight model that allowed for reasoning to be done for everyone. These changes shifted the whole industry, and we've seen crazy things happening since. So crazy that our friends over at OpenRouter took the time to break it all down. They have unique insights on everything going on because they host and let you use every model. They do some rough top-level analytics on all of the things that are running through OpenRouter, which gives them a shitload of interesting data to use to help break down trends. From the weird use cases for LLMs, and spoiler, programming's actually number 2. You'll be very surprised what number 1 is. To the split across open and closed weight models, which has been really cool to see. It's over 30% open weight models overall now, which is nuts. And the different releases that got us here are really cool. The absurd growth in token usage overall, it's been crazy. Seriously, there's so much cool shit in this paper. I can't wait to break it all down for you. But as a person who spent a lot of money on tokens in 2025, we do have bills to pay. So we're going to do a quick break for today's sponsor. Stop me if you've heard this one before. I rolled my own auth and I regret it. For T3 Chat, I built my own auth platform using open source packages and it worked a bit for the most part. But as soon as we wanted to do anything even vaguely complex, it fell apart. We lost multiple potential deals with businesses that wanted to adopt T3 Chat because we had no way for them to authenticate their business users. That has all been fixed because we made the move to WorkOS. We are very thankful we did. It has allowed for integrations that were impossible for us to deal with before. We're actually really liking a lot of the other subproducts too. Things like Vault are super cool for encrypting user data. Things like API keys. If users want to bring their own API key to your service, Vault makes it trivial to do that in a way that is safe and not exposing the data. The admin portal is the killer feature though. This makes it so easy for anybody at any company to set up your platform. If the IT team at Microsoft has to onboard for your product, good luck, have fun with all those calls. If you're not using WorkOS, and if you are, you send them a link, they click on whatever auth method they want to use, and they're good to go. If you've never had to deal with ADP or SAML or Okta before, I envy you. And now you won't have to because you know about WorkOS. Speaking of miserable auth stories, they're also working really hard in figuring out how to auth your MCP servers, which is a non-trivial task if you've watched my videos on the topic. I'm so thankful that WorkOS is figuring all of this out because I was so tired of doing it myself. I highly recommend checking them out if you haven't at soydev.link/workos. Shout out to OpenRouter and A16 for putting the time into doing this type of research. They're one of the few companies that's well positioned to get this type of data since OpenRouter lets you route to all the different models. They get insights for all the different use cases. And they've been collecting some very, very interesting anonymized data throughout. With the release of the first widely adopted reasoning model, O1, on December 5th of 2024, the field shifted from single-pass pattern generation to multi-step deliberation inference, accelerating deployment, experimentation, and new classes of apps. As the shift unfolded at a rapid pace, our empirical understanding of how these models have actually been used in practice has lagged behind. In this work, we leveraged the OpenRouter platform, which is an AI inference. You know what OpenRouter is if you're here. They've done over 100 trillion tokens of real-world LLM inference across tasks, geographies, and time. In our empirical study, we observed substantial adoption of open weight models, the outsized popularity of creative roleplay beyond just productivity tasks that many assume dominate LLMs, as well as coding assistance categories, plus the rise of agentic inference. They also have identified different cohorts and groups of users that stick around more. The glass slipper effect of people who showed up early sticking around much longer than people who are showing up later. So those early people to LLMs stick around. Findings underscore the way developers and end users engage with LLMs in the wild is complex and multifaceted. We discuss implications for model builders, AI devs, infrastructure providers, and outline how a data-driven understanding of usage can inform better design and deployment of LLM systems. Should be fun. As always, the whole thing is linked in the description if you want to read it. We will be skimming and finding useful parts throughout. Great research regardless. You know they're going back in time when they're talking about Sonnet 2.1 and Anthropic's improvements on RAG. Good old RAG. Good old days. So the different sections are open versus closed source models, agentic inference, category taxonomy, geography, effective cost versus usage dynamics, and retention patterns. Should be fun. All of this is metadata, so there's no user content data exposed at all. They use the Google tag classifier for content categorization. No direct access to user prompts or model outputs was available for the study. Instead, OpenRouter performs internal categorization on a random sample comprising of approximately 0.25% of all prompts and responses through a non-proprietary module, the Google Tag Classifier. While this represents only a fraction of total activity, the underlying dataset remains substantial given the overall query volume presented by OpenRouter. Google Tag Classifier interfaces with Google Cloud Natural Languages Classify Text Content Classification APIs. The API applies a hierarchical language-agnostic taxonomy to textual input, returning one or more category paths like computers and electronics programming, arts, entertainment, role-playing games, etc., with corresponding confidence scores in the range of 0 to 1. The classifier operates directly on prompt data up to the first 1,000 characters. The classifier is deployed within OpenRouter's infra, ensuring that classifications remain anonymous and are not linked to individual customers. Huge. Categories of confidence scores below the default threshold of 0.5 are excluded from further analysis. So if it doesn't get scored highly enough in a thing, it just ignores it. Cool. So they have made these buckets for the categories and show which tags link to each. I don't know if this was public before, but this is really cool because I look at that data a lot. Programming, roleplay, translation, general Q&A knowledge, productivity writing, education, literature, creative writing, adult, and others. They also break out between open source and proprietary variants, origin variants, Chinese versus everywhere else, because China's killing it that hard, especially in the open weight world. Prompt versus completion tokens, which is interesting. Prompt tokens being the ones you send, completion tokens being the ones you receive. And we have geographical segmentation. Should be fun. They use billing location. Let's take a look at the data. Here is one of the most fun charts. This is token share by source type and origin. Light blue is Chinese open weight models. Middle blue is anywhere else, rest of world open weight models, and then dark blue is closed weight models. So even though OpenRouter's like main value prop is that it's easier to access every model, with that you would imagine that the main use case is open weight models. I know it is for us. The majority of our use case for OpenRouter and T3 chat is models that are hosted by Chinese labs, where we don't want to use the Chinese infra. We want to use American providers and other providers that have better data retention policies. OpenRouter almost feels essential if you want to use models like Kimi K2, for example. So seeing them still having vast majorities of their traffic being closed weight is nuts. There was a brief moment around when Qwen 3 and GPT OSS dropped, where over 30% of the inference they were seeing was open weight, but now it's back in the 20% range or so. Very interesting. Again, their data is going to be biased towards the open weight options because they are an easy way to use them, test them, and integrate them. But even then, they're seeing 70% plus using closed weight models. So as cool as open weight models are, even a place like OpenRouter is still seeing them as the minority of the usage for AI. Very interesting. I would have expected bigger for them in particular. It's also crazy to see that at the start of 2025, there was very, very little usage of Chinese open weight models, and that very quickly changed. By the end of the year, the majority of open weight models are Chinese, at least open weight usage. While proprietary models, especially those from major North American providers, still serve the majority of tokens, open weight models have grown steadily, reaching approximately 1/3 of usage by late 2025. This expansion is not incidental. Usage spikes align with major open model releases like DeepSeek V3 and Kimi K2. It's hard to understate how big of a deal V3 was. I know everybody was excited about DeepSeek R1, but V3 was the holy shit, there's something special happening here moment. And Kimi K2 is honestly similar in this regard. I like that they called that out here. There's a reason it's now the default on T3 chat. If you go to an anonymous tab on T3 chat, Kimi K2 is the default now because it is the most pleasant model to talk to that I've personally ever used. I genuinely really, really like Kimi K2, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for a good model to talk to. That's why we made it our default. They're very, very competitive. There's also other competitive launches like DeepSeek V3, further additions, as well as the GPT OSS models, and these have been adopted rapidly and sustained their gains. GPT OSS is also criminally underrated for various things. I use it a lot more than y'all would probably guess. Since the GPT OSS model came out around the same time as O4 did, if I recall, it was between O4 and GPT-5. Because of that, it kind of got missed, I feel like, and no one really embraced the things it was great at. Like we see here, it's the #1 model for legal questions in the legal category on OpenRouter. It's #1 in technology. It's #1 in finance. It's #1 in science. Hell, it's #2 in programming. And everything else is quite a bit further behind on. I use it for data stuff all of the time. Because on the fast providers, if we scroll a little bit, you'll see some of them. Like Base 10, or where is my boys at Grok? Or Grok, Grok's pulling 511 tokens per second. That's 10 times what you get for something like GPT-5. Insane. There are some places that can pull it over 1,000. Cerebras is pulling 2,000 tokens per second with it. That is unbelievably fast. And the value of that speed isn't just like, oh, it's really fast. It's the speed plus the price, plus its ability to do things like follow the shape of an object well, make it great for parsing absurd amounts of data. We use this for doing sentiment analysis on the comments on my videos. We use this for analyzing the results from Snitchbench. We use this for a ton of things. It's a great model. It also can run on my computer at reasonable speeds. If I open up LM Studio, since my MacBook has a ton of memory on it, it can run these big models pretty fast. It's able to run the GPTOSS 20 bill version at like 90 or so TPS. But the 120 bill version, I assumed it wouldn't be able to do shit with because that's a huge model. That is a 60 gig model. I couldn't run that faster than like 18 TPS on my RTX 5090. But on here, on my M4 Max MacBook, it runs quite a bit faster. You have to wait for it to load into memory, but that's the key. Since it's 60 gigs and my laptop has 128 gigs, it can load the whole thing into memory. No, this is not an M5. The M5 does not have a model with this much RAM. I'm on an M4 that I just bought because we don't have an M5 Pro yet. And this is why. You cannot get this speed on an M5 right now. As it's write an essay about why Rust is better than C++. And that is faster than reading speed. That's flying. This is going this fast, not just because my processor is fast. It's mostly because my RAM is insane and I have memory that works with my GPU. Doesn't matter how much RAM you put on your desktop if you're running a 5090, because the 5090 has a certain amount of VRAM that you can't really expand. So if you can't fit the model in your VRAM, it's going to run like shit. I can fit it in my VRAM because I'm on a MacBook, which means I have unified memory. So the RAM is the same as the VRAM. So I'm able to pull a faster speed here than I can on my giant beefy gaming desktop with a 5090 on it. Yeah, that was 71 tokens per second. That's faster than GPT-5 over API. It's awesome. That's so cool. I had to use half my RAM for it, but now that I've ejected this, it should be totally fine. After it's done beach balling, so it used all my memory. And that's all local. That's entirely offline. So yeah, GPTOSS, criminally underrated, but if you know, you know, and it definitely caused a spike in usage of open weight models. As we see here, Kimi K2, Qwen 3, and GPTOSS all caused the spike that led to open weight models being over 30% of the usage. And if we look at the overall token usage instead of just as a percent, you'll see OpenRouter had a very good year. Good for those guys. At the end of 2024, the weekly share of Chinese open weight models was only 1.2%. Now it's nearly 30% of total usage among all models in some weeks. Over the one-year window, they average approximately 13% of weekly token volume, that being Chinese models are at 13%, with strong growth concentrated the second half of 2025. This is very interesting. It turns out that DeepSeek wasn't the point where everyone started using these Chinese models. It was around halfway through the year when we got Kimi and Minimax and Qwen got good and all these other drops happened. For non-Chinese open source models, averaged 13.7%, and proprietary models maintained their 70% share, roughly. This pattern has materially reshaped the open source segment and progressed global competition across the LLM landscape. Absolutely. It's been a crazy year for open weight models. The fact that the default model in T3 chat is an open weight model and that like half of my personal inference is going through open weight models is just kind of crazy. Key open source players. This is by number of tokens. Even though I just said DeepSeek wasn't the main player that got this bump, they still are the single biggest one, pulling 14.37 trillion tokens over OpenRouter from November 2024 to November 2025. That is crazy. Qwen's at 5.6, which is also nuts, especially because I personally don't find those models particularly great. Meta and Mistral did okay here as well. OpenAI, especially when you consider the fact that they put out their first open weight model halfway through the year, them being this high is impressive. Minimax, again, coming halfway through the year with their first relevant model, being that high is crazy. ZAI doing very well as well. They're the GLM models. And then Moonshot, my underrated goats, at 0.92. I'm sad they didn't hit the 1 trill. We're working our way towards that with Kimi as the default now. Hope you guys can climb this real fast. Also, Minimax was free for a bit too. That's another thing to account for with OpenRouter. Models that are provided for free tend to get boosted really, really hard because a lot of OpenRouter's like heavy users are cost sensitive. That's also a big part of why the role-playing community seems to really like DeepSeek. It's not so much that they like the model, It's mostly that they provide them for free, and that target and that demographic is very cost sensitive, so they love using free models. This is also why XAI always brags that they're so popular on OpenRouter. It's because they provided Grok for free for so long when they put out the fast version. Obviously, when you're using something for free, there is some value exchange there. They're almost certainly tracking all of the things you send and using that for post-training. So know that when you use the free models, there's no way they're just giving that out for free out of the kindness of their heart. And now we have the decline of DeepSeek's dominance. Oh boy, this will be a fun chart. Yeah, as we see here, DeepSeek was the king of these open weight models for a while, quickly eating into Llama's previous stronghold. But then as the summer hit and we got more of these Chinese open weight models like Moonshot with K2 or Minimax or ZAI, you'll see their share just getting eaten up fast. But then they dropped v3.1 of DeepSeek and won a huge chunk of it back. And they got to this point here where it's actually is like the peak of, no, it's not. The peak of DeepSeek's ownership was definitely here. They lost a whole bunch. They dropped v3.1 in September, climbed back for a bit, and now it's dwindling. Right now it's probably up again because 3.2 is nuts, but they also sucked at hosting that for a while, so who knows. Their near monopoly on open weights was shattered by the summer inflection. The market has since become both broader and deeper, with usage diversifying significantly. New entrants like Quen's models, Minimax's M2, Moonshot's Kimi K2, and OpenAI's GPT-OSS. I don't know why they're just skipping ZAI and GLM here, because those models did really well too. They actually performed higher than Moonshot there. Wonder why they skipped that. Interesting. Regardless, they all did very, very well. By late 25, the competitive balance had shifted from near monopoly to a pluralistic mix. No single model exceeds 25% of open source tokens, and the token share is now distributed more evenly across 5 to 7 models. The practical implication is that users are finding value in a wider array of options rather than defaulting to one best choice. Yep. This isn't just like, oh, I prefer this model or I prefer this model. This is also, this one is cheaper and can handle more tokens. This one can do reasoning with images. This one is really good at tool calling, but this one isn't. This one handles reasoning well and this one doesn't. This one writes well. There's a lot of reasons to prefer different models. Like I obviously like talking to Kimi K2, but I like doing data analysis with GPT-OSS. There's good use cases and bad use cases for all of these. You just got to play with them to know. Overall, the open source model ecosystem is now highly dynamic. Some key insights include the top tier diversity, where now there's tons of different families of open weight models, the rapid scaling of new entrants, people show up and suddenly blow up, and the iterative advancement. The longevity of DeepSeek's presence at the top underscores that continuous improvement is critical. Their successive releases like Chat v3, R1, and now v3.1 and 3.2 are keeping it competitive even as challengers emerge. OSS models that stagnate in development tend to lose shares to those with frequent updates at the frontier or domain-specific fine-tunes. The open source arena resembles a competitive ecosystem where innovation cycles are rapid and leadership is not guaranteed. It feels like the early days of closed-weight models in the open-weight world, and it's awesome to see. The model size versus market fit. Medium is the new small. Very interesting. I definitely felt this myself. For example, with GPT-OSS, that is a medium model because I can run it on my laptop. Large open weight models are things that you cannot run on consumer hardware that require specialized hardware, and small models are things that you can run on cheaper hardware like my 5090 instead of my MacBook. I know that sounds silly, but the amount of RAM used is an important key to the differences here. And it is cool to see how many small open weight models got useful. It's still crazy that there are so many large open weight models that are good too, because there's the only people who benefit from a large open weight model are the hosts that can use it because they have enough H100s around. So seeing large open weight models do much better at the start of the year makes sense. Something like DeepSeek R1 is a very large model. You're not running that without a distillation of it locally at all. But now we're getting more stuff like 120 bill models that are reasonable to run, but also seeing some growth in the small models too. That said, we're getting some crazy big open weight models. I know Kimi, for example, is like 1 trillion parameters. Good luck running that locally. Their definitions, oh, interesting. By their definition, GPT-OSS is large at 120 bill. I guess that's fair, but just interesting to see. Small is under 15 bill params, medium's 15 to 70, and large is 70 plus. I would have cut this differently. I would have done small as anything under 30 and large as anything over 150, but I get it. Especially now with RAM prices, it makes sense to knock these down. The data on developer and user behavior tells us a nuanced story, though. The figure shows that while the number of models across all categories has grown, the usage has shifted notably. Small models are losing favor, while medium and large ones are starting to capture more value. This is very interesting. The size of the model helps determine a lot of different things. Obviously, the amount of knowledge baked into it, the size of it affects that a lot, but it also affects the price a ton, too. These large models are much more expensive than the small ones because you can run them quicker and on cheaper hardware. So the interest in small open weight models is maintaining, and medium is growing meaningfully because the medium ones are really good price to performance value. The small market is declining overall. Things like Gemma 3 12 bill, which was released in August, saw rapid adoption, but now it's competing in a crowded field where users are continually seeking the best alternative. We're still waiting on Gemma 4. I think it'll happen at some point this week. Google's been teasing it on Twitter all week, but we'll see. The medium market, finding the model market fit. The medium model category tells a clear story of market creation. The segment itself was negligible until Qwen 2.5 Coder 32 bill dropped in November of last year, which effectively established the whole category. The segment then matured into a competitive ecosystem with the arrival of other contenders like Mistral Small in January and GPT OSS 20 bill in August. Again, I would put OSS 20 bill as a small model, but I understand why they're making this distinction. The large model segment's been very interesting with Qwen 3 235 bill or ZAI's models, as well as the GPT OSS 120 bill, all capturing meaningful and sustained usage. The parallelism suggests that users are actively benchmarking across multiple open large models rather than converging on a single standard. Yep, absolutely. I play with all of them, and they all have good use cases. So I just cropped this because I want you guys to look and guess without seeing. What use case do you think is in the yellow? This use case is between 40 and 80% of the usage of open weight models on OpenRouter. You've got to be thinking stuff like code or maybe chat or knowledge, but your guess would be code, right? That's what mine would have been. Reality is always more interesting because that is the role-playing category. Yeah, the weebs cannot be stopped. Role-playing is around 52% of the use of open weight models on OpenRouter. There have been a lot of theories as to why this is. The one I've grown to believe the most is that this category is price sensitive, and the free models like DeepSeek v3.2 free are very well regarded in those communities, and they are willing to let them have all of their data so they can get good enough role-playing. Interesting. The figure above highlights that more than half of all open weight models have their usage falling under roleplay, while programming is the second largest category. This indicates that users turn to open models primarily for creative interactive dialogues like storytelling, character roleplay, and gaming scenarios, and for coding-related tasks as well. The dominance of role-playing, hovering at more than 50% of all open weight tokens, underscores a use case where open models have an edge. They can be utilized for creativity and are often less constrained by content filters, which make them attractive for fantasy or entertainment applications. I wish they would show what percentage of those are using the free versions of the models. That's still my hypothesis, but the fact that they are less likely to be constrained by the hosts makes a lot of sense too. You can only bake so much security into the model itself. Most labs put a layer in front of the model that will detect if the query is bad and block it, rather than just baking the safety into the model itself, because you can't adjust that over time. But that also means the open weight models, if they have weird behaviors that they don't tune out properly, that's there forever. The weights are public. Roleplay tasks require flexible responses, context retention, and emotional nuance, attributes that open models can deliver effectively without being heavily restricted by commercial safety or moderation layers. This makes them particularly appealing for communities experimenting with character-driven experiences, fan fictions, interactive games, and simulation environments. Makes sense. We look at the breakdown just within Chinese open weight models, it's shifted quite a bit. There was a point where programming had overtaken roleplay, but now it's a little bit closer. Roleplay has knocked its way down to around 33% of Chinese tokens, which is interesting. And if I recall, a significant portion of that is on the DeepSeek free tier. The shift suggests that models like Qwen and DeepSeek are increasingly used for code gen and info-related workloads. While high-volume enterprise users may influence specific segments, the overall trend points to Chinese open-source models competing directly in technical and productivity domains. And overall, over the year, technology and programming were 39%, and roleplay was around 33%. So, looks like programming is winning in this space now. But what if we break down our usage of models in programming by open source versus closed versus not Chinese? It's very interesting. Again, with that surge in the summer with Minimax M2, GLM 4.5, Kimi, and all of that, we saw a huge bump in the percentage of tokens going through OpenRouter being used for code tasks. Massive bump. It flattened a little bit, bumped again in October. I'm curious what open weight model was put out from somewhere else that bumped there. Might have been a Mistral thing. We'll see in a sec. And now the non-Chinese open weight models are barely being used, and closed models are still winning by far. Let's see how they break this down. Chinese open source models in blue delivered the majority of open source coding help driven by early successes like Qwen 3 Coder. By quarter 4, Western OSS models such as Llama 2 Code and GPT OSS had surged, but decreased in overall share in recent weeks. The oscillation suggests a very competitive environment. Yep. Developers are open to whatever open source model currently provides the best coding support. As a limitation, the figure doesn't show absolute volumes. Open source coding usage grew overall, so a shrinking blue band doesn't mean Chinese open source lost users, only relative share. Good to know. Role-playing breakdown for open source models. Interesting. Non-Chinese open weight models are 43% of the role-playing use case. Very interesting. The most recent numbers, DeepSeek v3 is still the most popular. R1T2 and v3.2 are close, though. Then it's Flash. Then it's DeepSeek 3.1. Then it's Gemini. Then it's Mistral Nemo. What? What the fuck? That does not line up at all with what I'm reading here. This looked like, in the roleplay category, non-Chinese open source was doing much better, but that does not line up with this at all. Like, others is 42.6%, but it's not... Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. And you can see here, when Grok 4.1 Fast first came out and was free, it just slaughtered, and as soon as it stopped being free, it vanished. Again, proving my theory that this community wants the cheap shit. There you go. 4.1 Fast was number 1 when it was free, by a lot, and as soon as it stopped being free at mid-December, it immediately vanished almost entirely from the chart. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't break this down a bit more. I want more info on the open weight non-Chinese models that are being used here, because they're just not sharing enough about it. Very interesting. I wish we had more info. Enough about open weight in China. Let's talk about the rise of agentic inference. This is the amount of tokens that are reasoning tokens, and we recently crossed the point where over half of the tokens that OpenRouter is watching get generated are reasoning tokens. I was saying for a bit that the average token isn't read by a human. This really emphasizes it. Unless you're reading every point of reasoning in every trace you do, which you can't with a lot of these models, they don't even share the reasoning data, you cannot possibly be reading all the tokens being generated. Those tokens for reasoning are making the actual answer more likely to be better, and the tokens that are being generated are often not even being shown to a human in the first place. They're being used to command tools to go do things. So yeah, that's one of the most interesting parts of this chart, is it's showing one of the many angles at which text generation models and LLMs are being used to generate things that aren't for a human to read. As shown in the figure above, the share of total tokens routed through reasoning optimized models climbed sharply in 2025. What was effectively a negligible slice of usage in the early Q1 days is now over 50%. The shift reflects both sides of the market. Oh, this isn't what I thought it was. This is share of all tokens routed through reasoning models versus routed through non-reasoning models. So this isn't what percentage of output tokens were or weren't reasoning. That would probably be much more brutal. This is what percentage of requests, not even requests, of the tokens sent to OpenRouter as input, what percent of them were sent to a reasoning model versus sent to a non-reasoning model. That makes more sense. Top used models with reasoning, Grok Code Fast 1 is number 1 because, again, they offered it for free. And since XAI's APIs suck to use and sign up for, most people opted to use it through OpenRouter. That makes sense that it's so high up, but again, it's there because it's free. XAI's Grok Code Fast 1 now drives the largest share of reasoning traffic, excluding free launch access. Interesting. Apparently, even if they exclude the free launch access, it's still number 1. That feels kind of bullshit. This is a notable change from only a few weeks ago where 2.5 Pro led the category and R1 and Qwen 3 were also in the top tier. This is very interesting that Gemini 2.5 Pro is so far ahead in OpenRouter. Again, my conspiracy theory there is that using Google's models through Google's APIs is the stupidest, most miserable fucking thing you can do. I say as somebody who does it a lot, it is hell. It is awful. I do not recommend anybody deal with Google's SDKs or APIs directly when you can use something like OpenRouter. I would gladly pay them the fucking 3 to 5% fee, whatever it is, to just route my traffic through OpenRouter and not deal with Google's bullshit. Both OpenAI and Anthropic have competent APIs and competent CLIs to use the models through if you're doing code, and competent integrations and editors like Cursor, Windsurf, etc. So the need to use something like OpenRouter to hit them is way, way lower. With Google models, there is basically no competent way to hit them other than OpenRouter, so we're kind of stuck here. But these are the biases we have to account for in this report because this report is generated by a source that inherently sees different patterns of traffic. As Clang said in chat, OpenRouter just works as opposed to Google Cloud's bullshit. Totally agree. Somebody said to check this graph out. Oof. Yeah. To go back to like Grok getting traffic because it's free, here you go. See all that purple traffic that just vanished all of a sudden? This is when they made that a free model. And as soon as it stopped being free, it disappeared from the chart. You get the idea. A lot of this data is inherently biased by the nature of the users and the nature of the reasons they're using models through OpenRouter. It's still really good info, but it's biased. It's also, again, to really just highlight how biased this is, there is no world in which anybody actually thinks that GPT-5 is less popular than GPT-OSS. Obviously. Like, duh. Why the hell is GPT-OSS 120B higher up on here than GPT-5 is? It's obvious if you've been listening. It's because GPT-5 is able to just be hit through OpenAI's APIs totally fine, but GPT-OSS isn't even hosted by OpenAI. You cannot use the GPT-OSS models by hitting the OpenAI infra. You have to use them elsewhere, which means you have to deal with other providers, or you use OpenRouter and it will route you to the best provider, which is a great, great option. So GPT-OSS is best used on OpenRouter the same way Gemini is. So yeah, all 5 of these models suck to use outside of OpenRouter and are great to use with OpenRouter. So it makes a lot of sense that they are the top 5. That does not mean any of these models are doing better than whatever the hell Anthropic's doing or what OpenAI is doing with their closed-weight models. It just means that on this chart with OpenRouter, OpenRouter gets a lot more traffic for models that suck to use outside of OpenRouter, which makes sense. It's kind of funny to say, but OpenRouter's edge is that XAI and Google really suck at making good developer experiences, and they can provide a better one by routing the traffic through a layer that doesn't suck. Turns out being a wrapper is a good business decision. And now we have the rising adoption of tool calling. This is interesting. I would have expected higher, but again, the use cases are interesting. Role-playing, for example, you're not going to be doing a whole lot of tool calling in. With programming, you're probably doing a lot more, but only 15% or so of the traffic going through OpenRouter has a tool getting invoked. Very interesting. The noticeable spike in May in the figure above was largely attributable to one sizable account whose activity briefly lifted overall volumes. Interesting. I'm trying to remember who it was. Somebody's using OpenRouter as their default provider and then moved off it, and it caused a spike. It was one of the open source code tools. I can't remember which it was. Regardless, you get the idea. Top 10 most used models with tool call finished reasoning. So this is models where they are generating responses and ending because there's a tool call they're waiting for, which is how tool calls work. So this is highest percentage tool calls. Claude 4 Sonnet is still the king of tool calls, as we could have expected. 3.5 and 3.7 were also great at it. And you can see how quickly when a new model drops from Anthropic, their traffic for the old one collapses. Like this pink here, this was 3.7. The gray is 4.0 mini. So I guess somehow in May, 4.0 mini traffic grew a ton. We just barely got Sonnet 4, if I recall. Yeah, so Sonnet 4 dropped near the end of the month. And most of the Sonnet 3.7 traffic had already started dying. In June, it collapsed even more. And by July, Sonnet 3.7's barely even being touched. And Claude 4 has crushed. And then slowly, as new models like 2.5 Flash dropped and got good enough to actually be able to do tool calls, it started eating into the margins of other things. And then 4.5 dropped and crushed everything. That all lines up as expected. But also notice how little 2.5 Pro got in terms of the ownership of this chart for tool calling. Part of this is because Gemini 2.5 Pro is really expensive. Part of it's because it's not the best at tool calls. And part of it's because if you're willing to pay those prices anyways, you might as well just use Claude. I've never been a big 2.5 Pro fan. All it has done is cost us a ton of money and a lot of support tickets. I'm thankful to watch it slowly die. Also notice that Gemini 3 Pro is not coming up here at all. It is late edition, so I wouldn't expect it to have snuck in particularly deeply, but I don't think it ever will because I think it got trumped really fast. Also, GLM is killing it in this too. The GLM models are really good at tool calling, and it's the only open weight model really holding some ground in here. That's cool to see. I somehow missed that initially. Good for ZAI. And now we have the anatomy of the prompts. The prompt tokens grew a ton. So when you send a request, the average number of tokens in a request is 4 times higher than it was at the beginning of the year. That's nuts. I did not expect it to grow that much. Completion tokens going up makes more sense though, because again, reasoning models generate way more tokens. So this being much higher makes sense. But only 3x when we got a 4x for the input is interesting. And programming is the main driver behind prompt token growth. So the number of tokens being submitted for code has gone up a ton over time, which is why the number of tokens per request has gone up so much. That makes a ton of sense. Longer sequences and more complex interactions. The average sequence length has grown over time. So this is number of tokens per generation. So prompt and completion together. And programming is going up way faster overall. It's meaningfully bigger than everything else. So for everybody asking why we don't do coding stuff in T3 chat, why we're not like letting you link your code base and whatever, it's because we would be increasing our cost by 4 to 6x and we charge $8 a month. Shut the fuck up unless you are going to build something or pay us way more. It just doesn't make sense for what we're trying to do, which is a really good chat experience for a reasonable price. If we let you bring your code base, we're just going to increase our cost by 4 to 6x. Go use Cursor. It's a good tool. Agentic inference is the new default. Together, these trends, rising reasoning shares, expanded tool use, longer sequences, and programmers' outsized complexity, suggest that the center of gravity in LLM usage has shifted. The median LLM request is no longer a simple question or an isolated instruction. Instead, it's part of a structured agent-like loop, invoking external tools, reasoning over state, and persisting across longer contexts. For model providers, this raises the bar for default capabilities. Latency, tool handling, context support, and robustness to malformed or adversarial tool chains is increasingly critical. For infer operators, inference platforms must now manage not just stateless requests, but long-running conversations, execution traces, and permission-sensitive tool integrations. Soon enough, if not already, agentic inference will be taking over the majority of the inference. Yes. And it's crazy how many of these like GPU rental services don't understand this stuff at all and are forcing companies like Moonshot to go put out benchmarks showing which hosts do and don't follow the tool call protocols properly. How are people using LLMs? This will be fun. Again, we saw role-playing was a big chunk, but we've seen programming, in particular programming through OpenRouter, growing massively. This isn't just LLM programming usage growing, although that is a huge portion. I think a significant chunk of this is that the open weight models that are best used through OpenRouter have become much, much better, especially around halfway through the year, which is why this giant spike started around halfway through the year. I'm curious if they agree with my analysis here. Open weight models got good at code, and OpenRouter is the best way to use open weight models, so they saw unique growth here. But they might try to generalize this across the industry, which I probably won't agree with. Now, of course, as LLMs become embedded in developer workflows, their role as programming tools is being normalized. The evolution has implications for model development, including increased emphasis on code-centric training data, improved reasoning depth for multi-step programming tasks, and tighter feedback loops between models and integrated development environments. They are not acknowledging the fact that this growth is almost certainly unique to them. Other places in the industry did not see code LLM usage go from 11% to 50%. They did because the models that they are best for got way better at code this year. Very specific to them. That said, Anthropic models are at 60% of the share for programming-based spend on OpenRouter. So maybe I can't make this statement so definitively, but at the same time, there's a lot of providers in here that are best used through them. And I expect Google to have that big of a stronghold there too. It was very interesting to see how quickly these other options have grown and gotten actual footing in the space. But it looks like it's a small enough percentage that I should shut my mouth on the open weight thing. I might be wrong on that. Very interesting. And Minimax taking a good slice too. Very, very interesting to see. If we look within categories, roleplay, only 15% of the roleplay is adult according to them, but over half is games. I know stuff like Dungeons and Dragons love having AI-generated role-playing text, so that makes sense. Programming is interesting how that's split. Scripting languages versus development tools versus other. I don't think these splits are useful, so I am going to skip most of this section. Author level insights by category. Different model authors are utilized in different usage patterns. Figure below shows distribution of content categories for the major model families. So Anthropic, obviously, mostly programming. A little bit of tech, not a whole lot of role play. Lots of code, though. Google's most popular categories, a little more varied. A lot more role playing, a lot less code, decent bit of tech, good bit of science. Not much analysis. I would have thought that people would use them more for analyzing documents and things, and that would be clearer here by showing like legal or finance or something. XAI was code until they made it free, and then it became role play and technology, I guess. And now it's not free anymore. It's going to go back to just code. I know how this works. OpenAI's had a very weird distribution where it was mostly science until June when they got better at coding, and then it became mostly code, with technology still being high. I'm curious what technology even means in these cases. Let's go back up and see. They don't even have technology broken out here. Oh, they do. Personal assistance, business and productivity software, web design and development. That's code. Bullshit. So I guess some code is put in there too. Weird category splits. And then DeepSeek is the role play machine. They should rename it to DeepSeek and Dragons at this point. Goddamn. And then Quen is mostly code with a weird variety of other random shit. Fascinating. And then we have usage across regions. North America versus Asia versus Europe versus other. Mostly North America still, but Asia's had a bigger and bigger chunk, at least on OpenRouter. Language distribution, over 80% is still English. Checks out. And then the glass slipper phenomena. That's what they talked about before, where when somebody tries a new model really early, they are much more likely to stick with it than if they come to it later. So people who tried Claude 4 in May, right when it dropped, much more likely to still be using it than people who tried it the month after. People who tried Gemini 2.5 Pro right when it dropped in June are comically more likely to still be using it than people who tried it later. Very interesting. The collection of retention charts captures the dynamics of the LLM user market across leading models. At first glance, the data is dominated by high churn and rapid cohort decay. Yet beneath the volatility lies a subtler and more consequential signal. A small set of early user cohorts exhibit durable retention over time. We term these foundational cohorts. They're not merely early adopters. Oh God, this is so LLM written. That pattern just screams LLM. These cohorts are not merely early adopters. They represent users whose workloads have achieved a deep and persistent workload model fit. We can't just product market fit everything, guys. Once established, this fit creates both economic and cognitive inertia that resists substitution even as newer models emerge. We introduced the Cinderella glass slipper effect as a framework to describe the phenomena. The hypothesis posits that in rapidly evolving AI ecosystems, there exists a latent distribution of high-value workloads that remain unsolved across successive model generations. Each new frontier model is effectively tried on against these open problems, and when a new release model happens to match a previously unmet technical and economic constraint, it achieves the precise fit, the metaphorical glass slipper. Okay, so if you have a problem that none of the models are solving, and you try a new model right when it drops, and it solves it, you just stick with it. That's the hypothesis. Interesting, can kind of see it. Hard to know for sure. It's also small enough numbers, it's hard to care. Like Llama did not have any real retention at all in comparison to Claude 4 Sonnet. But even then, like a lot of this could be measured by how long did it take for them to ship something new. Like Claude 4 Sonnet, they shipped 4.1, then 4.5 pretty quickly after. Gemini 2.5 Pro, they did not ship anything until over 6 months later. So obviously that's going to stay flatter. I don't buy this part. I think this is a bit of a reach. Apparently they're using 4.0 mini as the golden example here. Yeah, God. I hate that 16 months later people are still using 4.0 mini. That was the model we shipped T3 chat with in January. Also, this is bullshit. 2.0 Flash never had any fit. 2.0 Flash is one of my favorite models. I use it for a ton of shit. I really just don't buy this part. And then the boomerang effect. The amount of reaches they're doing to explain this, no, I don't believe this at all. Let's look at cost versus usage. This will be much more interesting. Cost is x-axis, total tokens is y-axis. Interesting to see translation focus on cheaper, legal also focusing on cheaper overall, tech and marketing leaning more expensive, and programming leaning right in the middle. Very interesting. The scatter plot above reveals a distinct segmentation of AI use cases, mapping them based on their aggregated usage volume against their unit cost. Both are logarithmic axes. Really interesting to see role play leaning towards more expensive models than legal does. Your lawyer's cheaper than your Dungeons and Dragons DM, guys. You heard it here first. An effective cost versus usage of models. This is fun too. You can see some models that are expensive getting much less usage and some that are cheap getting much more. But overall, it's pretty evened out. There's a very slight trend downwards where usage goes down as cost goes up. It's a weak overall correlation. Interesting. Cool to know that the cost is not a big driver of usage overall. Quality and capabilities often trump cost. That checks out. Being cheap isn't enough. A model must also be differentiable and sufficiently capable. Yep. Cool. What a paper. Here is the end discussion. The ecosystem is now multi-model. The usage diversity beyond productivity. We're seeing lots of other use cases. Agentic use cases are going up a ton. The geographical split is widening, but still mostly North America based. Cost versus usage. Cost does not really significantly drive usage in ways that you would expect. And the glass slipper effect, which I don't agree with. This was really interesting research. I am pumped that they published this and shared all of this data. This was fun. Thank you to the OpenRouter team as well as A16 for helping out with this. I feel like I learned a lot and have a much better idea of the whole ecosystem and the greater picture of what's going on. Curious how y'all feel though. Are read-throughs like this useful? Are you interested in the greater market stuff? Or was this just a really long, boring video? Maybe you didn't even get to this part. Let me know what y'all think. And until next time, peace nerds.